Speaker McCarthy, because that's all I've been. Well, did I say Speaker McCarthy? That I misspoke.
All right, here we go. Welcome to Advisory Opinions. I'm Sarah Isgur. That's David French. And I promised y'all months ago the highlight of the semester, if you will. And it's finally here, our Supreme Court preview with the Lisa Blatt and Sarah Harris. I feel weird calling you Lisa, like you're Lisa Blatt, even though it's not like there's a whole lot of other Lisas running around Supreme Court circles, but it would be like calling Lisa Frank Lisa. Like, nope, it's Lisa Frank, it's Lisa Blatt, Miss Blatt if you're nasty, right? So welcome, Lisa Blatt, Sarah Harris, Williams and Connolly power team of the Supreme Court world. Thank you guys for joining.
Thank you. We're super, 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 super psyched to be here.
Lisa is a Texan by birth, by culture, by cowboy boots. Sarah Harris and I went to law school together, and David's just here. He's hanging out.
I'm here.
Not a lot to contribute, but there he is.
I'll listen in. I'll enjoy listening in. I'm looking forward to it. Front row seat. It'll be fantastic.
David, you're now in my hometown, Nashville. So we have that at least in common. The Texans against the Nashvillians.
Oh, Sarah, I like you so much. So
this is not going to end well. This is not going to end well for you, Sarah.
I know, don't mess with Texas, but I guess I'm daring fate.
So, Sarah, you are fully aware then that Texas is Tennessee's first and only colony, because you have the author of the Texas Declaration of Independence, a Tennessean, the first governor and president of the Republic of Texas, a Tennessean, Davy Crockett, a Tennessean.
Notice how they all left.
No, basically, that's what colonists do, Sarah. They colonize. And so when I go to Texas, I just, walk past the border saying, you're welcome, so.
James K. Polk, ardent expansionist.
Yeah. I mean, we conquered Texas essentially for America. So yeah, it's absolutely correct. I'm already enjoying this podcast.
What's that Margaret Thatcher quote? If you have to tell people, you're not. We'll get to some of my feminist theories later on. Lisa and Sarah being two of my favorite feminist icons in the legal world. But first, we're going to start with the boring stuff. We're going to do some law here, some Supreme Court term. Lisa, I'll start with you. And look, we're going to get to some of your better, more amazing cert petition lines, argument lines, all of that. But big picture, we're still getting to know this Supreme Court. How do you think when you walk in to argue a case of what the lineup is, who you're looking at? Is it 6-3? Is it 3-3-3? Is it just a grab bag? What's your overall thesis on this court?
So there's my thesis to the public, and then there's my thesis as an advocate. My thesis as an advocate is I don't do whatever you just said. It's always the same court to me. It's the Supreme Court. It's 9 brilliant jurists whose vote I need, and I don't like the thought of I'm talking to individual justices. In terms of the public and the big cases, race, religion, guns, abortion, it's a 6-3 court, and sometimes it's a 3-3 court, depending on where Justice Kavanaugh is leaning, and sometimes Justice Barrett and the Chief.
You have an interesting background as well. You worked in the Solicitor General's office before going into private practice for a long time. You were in the SG's office. Do you see a difference from that perspective and how you view the court?
Yeah, I mean, it gets me a little emotional when I think about it, but there's no one who will ever replace Justice Scalia. And that's the biggest difference. He's just, I don't know how to explain it as an advocate. It was pure joy, just unadulterated joy and fun. And there probably will never be another justice like him in terms of just arguing. And I probably got my sort of style because he just loved to joust and have fun and really get into it. But yeah, it's different. The old chief is different than the new chief. And, each of the Justice Stevens had his own style, just as Breyer did. So they all had oral argument styles. But the biggest difference to me in terms of an advocate is the loss of Justice Scalia.
And Sarah, you also were in government. We were actually at DOJ at the same time. It's very annoying to have two Sarahs with H's, both doing these things. So we will try. Hopefully you guys know my voice on the podcast, and Sarah's the other Sarah who doesn't have my voice. But still. And now, Sarah, you've argued all these cases at the Supreme Court since you left DOJ. How do you think of the court? And why is Lisa wrong?
Lisa is 1,000% correct on many things, including that you don't go into the court thinking you know the lineup or that you can jettison any votes. Even hostile questions from justices who you pretty much know are not voting for you are also chances to nail down the people who you think are in your camp. So yeah, I think from the advocate's vantage, you just go in and answer questions, try to get your points out, be responsive, try to persuade people. And with respect to the court writ large, also correct. I think that it can be a 6-3 court. That's not a novel concept. I think the more interesting thing is just, as Lisa said, where will Justice Kavanaugh and the chief go in some of the cases? How eager or not will they be in cases that present opportunities to overturn cases to actually do so? Obviously, Loper Bright with Chevron on the potential chopping block will be like the next kind of test of that.
So just for listeners who aren't uber familiar with the two of you, I mean, Lisa is a dyed-in-the-wool liberal Democrat who has committed various apostasies and heresies, but nevertheless, Sarah is a whack job conservative. I mean, a total lunatic. So I direct this question to Sarah for that reason. Why do you think Kavanaugh and Gorsuch come out so differently on so many of these cases?
I think it's a mistake to think of conservatives as uniform. They're just like part of even Justice Gorsuch and Justice Thomas, who are very, even more similar in terms of, I think, where they start off in terms of originalism, reach very different results, especially in cases involving Native Americans, Indian law cases. I think it just shows if you're starting from a methodological vantage that you share, you can easily reach different results depending on how you read original sources. It's not a sort of you must buy into the bottom line kind of situation. And for Justice Kavanaugh, I think he is, you can tell from his opinions, especially some of his separate writings, more conscious of practical consequences. And Justice Gorsuch is not. I think he avowedly does not focus on that at all. So I think that adds another factor that can sort of push them further apart.
So let me ask this of both of you guys. So start with Lisa. Longtime Advisory Opinions listeners will know exactly where we stand on sort of what are the most important cases of this term. And I'm not going to go and use the phrase, well, I'm only going to use it this one time for briefly, text history and tradition, because if I talk about it again, people are going to throw their phones through a window because we've talked about it a lot. As you're looking at this term, a lot of people are pegging sort of Rahimi as the most consequential case, potentially. What are you thinking of, say, the 3 or 4 or 1 or 2 most consequential cases coming up this term?
Well, I think Rahimi, won't be that consequential because I think there's a narrow way to rule for the government in terms of a facial challenge. This criminal defendant had both the finding of individual dangerousness and not just based on the statutory prohibitions of guns, just if the order bans you from beating up your wife or spouse. But so I think that will go off narrowly. The court will have to dance around sort of the mess they made in Bruin, saying you have to find a closely analogous, whatever that court said in Bruin, whatever they said about history. I think there'll still be the ongoing issues with the voting rights cases. I like watching the sort of the social media cases. To me, are the most interesting because I like cases that appeal to everyday Americans that see, that they understand. As a technical matter, the Purdue pharmacy case is, the Purdue bankruptcy case is super interesting doctrinally, but the social media cases dealing with, whether public officials who go on Facebook or state actors, or whether Florida and Texas can tell social media companies how rank or how to disclose how they rank content, and whether the Biden administration can talk to the social media companies are more interesting. The Miffy case presumably will be on, and that's a case that I think half of America cares deeply about.
Which one's that one?
So, the abortion case. The
mifepristone. The Miffy.
Yes.
I think everyone calls it Miffy. I don't know I can't pronounce the name. I just think, sure, it's got this issue of FDA regulation and stuff like that, but any case with the A word in it is going to be,
right.
is a big deal.
Mean, Lisa, I'm shocked you're not giving any love to SEC in-house adjudications, but I actually
because she knew you would, Sarah. She knew you'd be all over that administrative state.
I just don't care about that subject, even though I teach separation of powers with Paul Clement. It bores me to tears.
I think it's probably the most consequential one, though, because if you look at the term from the vantage of which cases are most likely to change the status quo, I think that the court
Chevron.
is very likely to, at least of all the separation of powers options on the table, likely to say that administrative law judges cannot be structured the way they are right now. And just even for going forward consequences for the government, I think that's just a big deal. Like, who can fire administrative law judges, of which there are almost 2,000 in the government? It actually matters a lot to people. And I think it could matter to the outcomes of these cases. So that would actually be my pick, even though it's not sexy.
A Loper's a little bit like Dobbs. The court will have to decide if a 15-week ban on Chevron is what they want to go with, or they just want to go with a complete overruling. So we'll have to see what happens.
Or they could just make it like the lemon test and say they had already overruled Chevron and you just didn't notice.
Yeah, it feels like that's the further zombification of Chevron is in the cards. Because, when Lisa talked about the narrowing, there's a way to deal with Rahimi that's quite narrow. There's a way to deal with Loper Bright that's quite narrow as well. And by the way, I'm thinking for distinguishing between the Sarahs, Tennessee Sarah and Texas Sarah.
I love that.
Or another synonym for that would be good Sarah and bad Sarah. So,
do you know we even have the same middle initial? She's Sarah M. Harris and I'm Sarah M. Isger. There's nothing. Yeah, it's Sarah all the way down. By the way, speaking of that SEC case, so Lisa, Sarah, and I are all also married to attorneys. And I do want to talk about my feminist manifesto is coming. But yesterday, husband of the pod and I took a little hike and our conversation revolved very much around the SEC case. And I thought to myself, man, if anyone overhears this, they're like, what losers? So I'm sure, Sarah, you and Jeff are just sitting and talking about that every night over wine after the kids go to bed.
Oh, yeah. That's what we talk about after the kids go to bed. What will happen to in-house adjudications at the SEC. That's for sure.
That's what keeps a marriage strong.
That and also golf.
All right. Y'all have some interesting cert petitions pending as well. Sarah and I were texting about them. I'm dying because somehow, Lisa, you end up getting these cases that almost reflect your personality.
Thank you for saying that.
You get the fun ones, right? You had Angry Cheerleader. You had the Jack Daniels dog toy. You had the Andy Warhol case as well. This time I read a cert petition involving CBD oil where you said, and I'm quoting, some people even say it's the new avocado toast. Whose line was that?
Obviously, when you say whose line is that, the answer is always Sarah. And I will say, if I could just go off a little bit on Sarah, I think if we have any brand or style, certainly for, cases too, a lot of it is Sarah. It's her unique storytelling, her unique turns of phrases. Some of my favorite lines ever in all briefs come from Sarah. But that is definitely, I love the way she comes up with these killer lines, and avocado toast is one of them. I will take credit though for the Warhol case. I discovered that case when it was in the district court, and just, match made in heaven.
People think Sarah is a super serious, nerd lawyer because she's so smart.
She is.
But in fact, she is all those things, but she has this killer dry sense of humor where you're like, was that a joke? Was she serious? Oh no. because it's so funny. It's like, I love it. So yes, I actually already could have guessed who wrote Avocado Toast.
I like to think of it as I'm the beauty and she's the brains of our duo.
Lisa has a more overt humor, though, in arguments, and it's a joy to behold, truly. Especially in person next to her. It's like, that was great.
So that's a great, I mean, I want to go back to some of the cases, but that's just a perfect segue, good Sarah, to what is so compelling about when I'm reading or listening to Lisa's oral arguments. You seem to have a kind of, I don't know, I'm looking for the right term, a familiarity, a confidence, a boldness in approaching the court that a lot of the other advocates don't have. Now, some of them, I could easily imagine, I've never argued in front of the court. I would walk up there to that podium. The first time I did it, petrified would be like probably the mildest version of how I would feel. And I wouldn't feel that sort of sense of confidence to be myself in any way. But you seem to have a sense of confidence that you can be yourself in front of the court. Walk through that process. How did that occur?
Yeah, let me just say a couple things. First of all, I'm extremely nervous when I'm up there. I'm very scared. I'm very insecure. I'm not confident. Second of all, I don't know how to be any other way of sort of my philosophy, and I've said it a million places. Someone's going to die at the end of the day, and I don't want it to be me. Someone's going to lose this case, and it's my client, and that person's life is on the line. And I remember I think it was Patty Millett, Judge Millett had some great line about that she was the only thing standing between her and doom for her client. And I remember Justice Ginsburg said when Judge Millett became Judge Millett, she said, "We just lost one of our tigers." So, and I thought that was the nicest thing anyone could ever say is that, be called a tiger. I will say, because a lot of people, and you're a podcast, I do hear a lot of criticism from one particular podcast about my style. And here's what I would say to that. Before you criticize me, I do think you should ask yourself, have you ever argued in front of the Supreme Court? And if you haven't, why? Whether it's you lack the skills, talent, or interest, or just you have a different passion, take a step back. And second of all, try to come watch me at argument. And actually, before you criticize it, look at the justices and see what they're doing. They're usually smiling at me. Part of it, it's almost like you hear me. Someone said something once that I show better in person than on the phone. I'm like, I don't think that I'm acting any different to them than I am to you. I'm just trying to explain to them why we should win and being as direct as I can. And I definitely regret a couple things. I regret interrupting Justice Sotomayor when she was trying to ask me a very helpful question. But generally speaking, I'm just trying to do my job and answer questions. I don't think people should try to emulate me because their personality is not like me. They should just be whoever they are and advocate. But I do find it annoying that sometimes people criticize me and they're either stupid or motivated by some political agenda.
Well, I think it's really interesting you talked about, this is kind of who I am. And because I look back on my own legal career and I look at the migration, I think as I became a better lawyer was when I began to shed the persona, which was, this is how I'm supposed to be. Like there's some image of what I'm supposed to do versus this is who I am. And I'm better at being me than I am at being not me and bringing myself to the argument.
David, if I could spend or had unlimited money, I would be Maureen Mahoney. I would love to sound like a Midwestern or Paul Clement, where everything they say sounds so reasonable. I could try, and I do think justices and judges find it somewhat refreshing. I would not recommend, part of the other thing, I'll just say two other things about my style. One is I'm a woman, and two, I'm old. And I think it helps for both of those. I do. I think it is harder. Normally men have all the advantages in the world, but I think sometimes it's easier to talk about things like pornography and sex when you're a woman.
Probably correct. Probably right.
I mean, let's not give short shrift, though, to your colloquy last term with Justice Alito about dogs peeing on your leg and dog poop. And I mean, that was nice.
I loved my exchange with Justice Alito.
You're in interstate commerce. Yeah.
But he's generally smiling at me. He knows that I'm just, look, I like nothing more than arguing in front of Justice Alito. It's the most fun I've ever had. It's great. It's so much fun.
No, Sarah, well,
I do regret asking him how old he was. It's like, shouldn't have said, I don't know how old. That was like, no, don't do that again.
We don't regret it. We don't regret it at all. No,
I mean, I think what I said on our podcast was, if you're Jack Daniels, can you imagine, like, they didn't even consider anyone else to argue that case. If given the topic, like, you have to have Lisa Blatt.
And I think that people criticize the brief because I had a riff on, the poop emoji. And it's like, life's too short. Life is way too short.
I mean, my personal view of the case is they saw Lisa, they saw that it involved a dog toy and also dog poop, and it was like an auto grant.
That's right. Who wouldn't want that case? And now, Lisa, do you wear your cowboy boots to argue? Because I've never gotten to see you argue in person.
No, I know. I wear my cowboy boots mainly in the Fifth Circuit and then at work and, on the weekends.
So all the other time.
Yeah, no, I mean, Justice Ginsburg gave me very good advice my first year before my first argument about how to dress in court. And the advice she gave me was, do you want a judge, or justice not looking at you, but listening to you? Don't wear anything or do anything to distract them. You just want them hearing what you're saying. And so you and I gave this advice, I coached debate for many, many years. And that was my advice to people. Before court is not the time to show off anything other than be as bland as possible. And just, you're there to get a job done.
That's funny because Ted Cruz has this story about when he became Texas Solicitor General and went and talked to the Chief Justice, and he was wearing his cowboy boots. And I think Ted, it wasn't arguing that day, but Ted said something like, "Don't worry, I won't wear these to court." And the chief said, "You're the Solicitor General of Texas. You have to wear cowboy boots to court. That's what we would expect." So just know that there is some pedigree for Texans wearing cowboy boots. I
just have to look, anything Justice Ginsburg's ever told me is the word of God. And she has basically instilled in me, you really want to be almost invisible when you're physically invisible when you're arguing.
Sarah, how have you approached argument? Are you scared when you're there?
Yes, I'm a rational person. Anyone who's not scared is probably doing it wrong. Of course you're scared. And then you start talking and answering the questions, and you're so excited to be up there answering questions about a case that you've been obsessing over that you stop being nervous. But yeah, if you're not scared, like in the lawyer's lounge and the hours beforehand, I don't know what's going on, but
you had some good ones last term. You had the Puerto Rico Financial Oversight Management Board one that made big splash. But of course, the case that I liked the most that you argued was the bad boyfriend case. The bankruptcy
Barton worker.
Yeah, the discharge petition where
husband. Yeah,
it was her husband. They flipped the house fraudulently. Yada yada. Is she on the hook for his bad behavior? Answer: yeah.
Yes, that was a tough one, but a fun argument just because the justices were super engaged, and it was great to be up there. And
I also think the fact that Sarah's had 5 arguments in 3 years of private practice is incredible. She was never in the SG's office, and to have argued 5 cases like that is truly extraordinary.
Well, also thanks to Lisa because she could have kept them
that's
all.
a really...
So now we got to get into that. That's the reason you're both here.
I'm so glad.
Well, if you thought I was rude before, wait till we keep going.
So good Sarah keeps coming up with the great segues, unsurprisingly. So this is a great segue because we just talked at our live podcast when Sarah came back about this, and we barely got into it at all, but sort of this whole process of mentoring. When are you making a decision that a more junior attorney is going to step up to the plate when you could always take it yourself, like you You have that authority. You have that ability to do it. But at the same time, you want to cultivate younger talent. And so kind of walk through that process. How does that work? And if, any sort of advice you could throw in because we have a lot of a law student and young lawyer listeners on sort of how they can prepare themselves, position themselves to be ready when the bell rings, so to speak.
So unfortunately, I don't think most people want to cultivate other talent. So I just think your premise is wrong. Most people are selfish, egomaniacs, and most of them are men. And I think I too was like that before I got to Williams and Connolly. I mean, I always wanted, I've been working with Sarah at another law firm. I always promoted her, made sure people under me got opportunity, but it was much more of a transactional issue. It was like, this is the way you keep good people. This is the way you recruit, unless you give them enough reward. But I never felt like it was a calling until I got to Williams and Connolly. Literally, it was just a self-interest thing. You kind of have to help other people, or they're going to leave you if you don't give them arguments. And Sarah was very adamant when she started working with me. She wanted an argument. I kind of said, yeah, whatever. And she's like, no, Lisa, get on the phone and call a bunch of, courts and get me an argument. So Sarah was very, very, persistent. But when I got to Williams and Connolly, I really decided this would be my legacy, and that I would make sure that I was not just about me, and that I would try to shame the rest of the bar into doing the same thing.
Okay, but Sarah, Lisa actually is the worst person to ask about this. You are the person to ask about this, because you are interviewing at a lot of different firms. Again, everyone knows you're brilliant, even if they don't know how funny you are, which I feel special for.
I don't know if I'm known for the right thing then. I don't know.
I think the first thing I ever said about her was she was the Terminator. I did not say she was
the first thing you said about me was that you liked my shoes and that we'd get along really well.
I think that's probably true.
That is definitely true.
So you're interviewing at all these places. You meet Lisa. How do you determine in the interview that it's going to work? What are you looking for? Did you know that this would be a mentoring situation? Was it just that she was smart and, had a bunch of arguments? So great. Because to me, I think that's really hard when you don't know someone. And of course, they're going to say all the right things. Oh, of course, I'm here to help you and to further your career. And we're going to focus on you. But most of them, to Lisa's point, don't mean it. So how did you get this so right?
Well, I like to get things right. So thank you. But I actually am a big believer in thinking that interviews, especially casual ones, are a good read on what people will be like as professionals. I mean, when you're looking at an appellate practice, and I started working with Lisa after clerking on the DC Circuit. So when I was looking at firms, I remember meeting with Lisa in a Starbucks, which turned out to be one of our favorite locations.
And a client.
And just getting to know her a bit. And it was somewhat goofy because we did sort of talk about our shared love of buying clothes and very frivolous things that are, it turns out, really good bonding activities when we're actually colleagues. And then just also hearing the unvarnished Lisa. I mean, to Lisa's credit, she doesn't do Washington fake. What you see is what you get. She is how she is an argument, in every other context. And I liked it. So I feel like we hit it off. As I noted, she thought my shoes were great. So I thought I could pass her fashion bar to the extent there was one. And it was sort of a leap of faith that it really worked out well. I mean, I remember our first couple of weeks in the office together, two of the firm's cases got granted. And so I was off to the races on a water rights case, drafting my first merits brief for Lisa, learning about this just massive fight over water between Texas and Oklahoma. And despite loving Texas, we were fervently in the Oklahoma camp on that one.
How could you, Lisa? How could you? It's our water.
Can I tell another story? Well, it was Tarrant. So that was North Texas, not South Texas. But one quick story about Sarah, that we've been working together maybe a year and a half. And she comes to me and says she's interviewing for a clerkship with Justice Thomas. And I said to her, wait, are you conservative? She goes, yes, Lisa. And I was like, wow. I mean, I literally had no idea what her politics were. Little did I know, oh my God, was she conservative? But I mean, it's just kind of I just don't.
Had you met her husband? Anything?
Jeff
was not maybe paying the closest attention to other markers, but that's okay. That's to Lisa's credit. She's not like doing a political filter.
Jeff likes rap music. He's one of my people.
In certain contexts. So Sarah, another thing that we talked about with the law students was the choices of when to be the big fish in the little pond and when to be the little fish in the big pond, and how you thought about that coming out of your clerkship and your career trajectory.
Such a great question.
Yeah, that is a good question. So I guess with Lisa, I don't really have to feel like, am I a fish or am I some other kind of spirit animal? I mean, it's just sort of, it feels like a partnership where I learn a lot from Lisa, but there's not sort of like, I don't know, I feel like it's more of a family relationship sometimes. In fact, she sometimes calls me Rachel, her daughter's name. So I just get good answering a lot. But I think it is like a common question for a lot of people. Just, do you want to be at a place where you are one of, like 15 people like you with your resume or not? And how do you differentiate yourself versus do you feel like you'll be at a place where you outgrow yourself? Like, it's almost like a Goldilocks situation, actually. Like, you're trying to find the right size for your personality and your sort of like personal comfort. Like, I don't really have great like global advice to people because so much of it is, do you like your colleagues? And are you the kind of person who finds a little more comfort, like safety in numbers, working with people who are like you and learning from a bunch of people at your level? Or do you kind of like to be having more riding on you, but the downside being it's a smaller practice potentially? So I feel like, I mean, we've also, I guess both Lisa and I like have gone through that in our law firm setting. Just having an appellate practice that has grown so much, especially with like the shift in firms.
So there was one thing, Sarah, or Lisa, when you're talking about Sarah, you talked about how Sarah said, I was assertive. I want arguments. And that really pinged for me. That was very interesting because there's sort of a school of thought that says, wait a minute, should you be that assertive? Like, should you, if you're coming into a position, maybe you're interviewing or you're new, should you step forward and say, this is something I really want versus a more kind of passive approach? And how do you weigh that? Because I could imagine a situation, I guess a lot of it's in how it's done. How you approach somebody with confidence matters a lot. The manner matters a lot. But I do think that's a really interesting question that a lot of younger lawyers ask themselves is, what's the line for saying, I'm ready, put me in, coach, I'm ready to play?
It's hard. I mean, with Luke McLeod, who's in the SG's office, I definitely was the aggressor in trying to encourage him to do his first Supreme Court argument. And because he was doing so well doing trials, and he's a brilliant engineer and a fantastic patent and trial lawyer, but I just had seen him argue in the Fifth Circuit, and it's like, oh my God, this guy's off the chart. So in same way with Amy Sahari, I definitely pressured her to do two, I guess. So, and same way with some associates, I go to them and say, you need to do an argument. But it's hard because if you're not ready, you shouldn't have that cut against you or be ashamed. I mean, I do think we have this philosophy at our firm that the world is a very big place and people have very different strengths and weaknesses, and there's room for everything. And so there are certain appellate lawyers who should be arguing because that's their strong suit, and then some who either shouldn't or should be doing, brief writing or other types of work. So my advice to lawyers is figure out your strengths and weaknesses, and run from the weaknesses or try to shore them up, but kind of lean into your strengths. But it's scary. And like I said, I've been insecure most of my life professionally. It's very hard to be confident and say, I want to do that argument. Like, that just is such an unnatural feeling. And I remember coming to Williams and Connolly in, I guess it was it 1990? And the advice to women then was, it was basically the lean in thing. You need to be proactive. And I was like, I don't even know what those people are talking about. I'm not being proactive on anything. I can barely, find the dry cleaners and I just can't deal with this, whatever advice I'm getting. I just wasn't ready for it. So sometimes it's like, you can tell people to do something, but they're just not ready. And that's okay. I wasn't ready until I was 30, 31 to sort of be a little more assertive. But I don't think I even got my assertive personality and argument till I was in my 40s, maybe argument number 14.
She remembers it. It's argument 14.
I think I do remember it.
What was your strategic thinking, Sarah, that, okay, I feel like Lisa's going to be receptive to this, or was that kind of your default going in, that I'm going to put the ball in the coach's court? I'm going to say, I'm ready. And it's then up to them to say yes or no.
It was like Court of Appeals when I asked Lisa for.
Yeah. So before Sarah did a Supreme Court argument, there was no way she was going to do it unless she was off the charts in her Court of Appeals. Her first one was great. She was in front of the Sixth Circuit. It was a prison case and you won it. I don't know, was it in front of Judge Sutton? I think it was a great Sixth Circuit panel. And it was good. It was good. But then the next one I saw, I was like, oh my God, she's incredible. And so when you see that, same way with Luke, you're just doing such a disservice as a person who's older and a mentor to not really, really promote someone when you see talent. I mean, that's a shame. Shame on you.
My advice to people now is, especially for associates who are coming off of clerkships or like a little more senior, to really prioritize like trying to find a place where you can get federal courts of appeals appointments pretty early on. And for me, that was key. Like Lisa really helped me get that first argument. And that's sort of what I raised my hand and said, like, can you please help me get this? And Lisa delivered. Like she called around and got one very quickly. Because if you don't sort of have some level of comfort before some courts, starting off in the Supreme Court is not exactly like where you start. They can crush your confidence pretty fast and they can tell if you're not having fun. But I think the confidence I had from doing a couple of Court of Appeals arguments before my first Supreme Court argument, and just feeling like this is something I feel like I know how to do, but also have fun doing, would come across. And so, yeah, I'm very glad that Lisa was very receptive to sort of the pitch on that.
And the way you get a client or co-counsel to agree to have younger people do it is you have to put your own life on the line and say, the truth is I would trust Sarah with my life. And she would do a better job. Not that she really needs an opportunity. I mean, that's not the line. That's not the move. This is what's in the best interest. And that has to be actually true.
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge part of this. Like a lot of people listening are going to be like, yeah, that's all well and good. But the client's like, I hired Lisa Blatt. Who is Sarah? Back, let's call it 4 years ago.
That's BS, Sarah. Those are people talking and justifying why they did the argument. That's not true.
All right. I want to do a little feminist manifesto now, which is I have worked in a few male-dominated areas.
That's a shock.
Yeah, shocking. I know. And yet, if you look at who my bosses have been, it's probably been about 50-50 women, meaning I'm working for women an outsized percentage of the time, even in places where probably the people who have those jobs is like 80-20 men.
Fascinating.
So I worked for Barbara Comstock. I clerked for Edith Jones. I worked for Katie Biber on the Romney campaign. My favorite, talking about interviews and like whether you're going to hit it off, after I got fired from the Hill, after 6 weeks of work, not great, I went to the Washington Post classified ads and found an opening at the FAA, We Fly Planes. And I went into interview and I had just seen Team America. And she asked me what I had done that weekend. And I said, I'd just seen Team America. And then we both at the same time started singing, America. Yeah, it's time to say the mother day. Yeah, I'm bleeping myself. And the fact that we both started singing that, it was the equivalent of you and Sarah talking about shoes. It was like, this is my person. We're going to find, in the tough parts, in the hardest moments, we're going to have something to fall back on, like a personal connection. It has not been lost on anyone in the Supreme Court bar that Lisa has argued more cases than any other woman in Supreme Court history, though perhaps a low bar, far lower than it should be. And that y'all are a little feminine duo out there arguing all these cases and doing really well. What do you think is the pluses, minuses? What's your feminist manifesto on why you're two women? Or is it just coincidental? Which is also a totally acceptable answer.
Sarah, it's coincidental. I do think she's just off. I've never seen somebody so talented of a writer. I've never seen anything like it. And she has a killer instinct like no other. And I could not have achieved really any success in the last, a lot. I mean, she abandoned me for some, I don't know, I think it was some past administration. It was before Biden. And then a clerkship with Justice Thomas. But literally, she's been the source of my success. But I don't think the fact she was a woman was really neither here nor there to me. I think it is, I mean, we have strong, like I know Beth Brinkman disagrees. I remember I did at the last women's panel I was called a disgrace by every woman on the panel. It was the day President Trump was elected, and I did a women's bar event. It was the last female event I'll ever do because everyone disagreed with me about advice for women. And it was like, I don't need this.
What was your advice
I know
that I'm definitely going to agree with?
To not follow your passion, don't follow your dreams, and just do whatever you're good at, and stop being passionate. Just nobody gives a shit about your passion. They just want somebody who will win. Like, I really could care less about a doctor's passion, or I think I've said this, do you really want an architect who's passionate about his work? No. I mean, seriously, it's like, just build my house. So, or a surgeon.
Shut up and build.
Surgeon, the notion that I want that person passionate, it's like, just don't mess up when I'm under the knife. So and it was just, I remember it was Dahlia Lithwick.
Mixing next
appalling. Question
of what Lisa's passions are.
Should be something to do with romance, presumably. But but Dahlia Lithwick said it was appalling. And I was like, okay. So but I do think, and I think I wrote about this in this lady lawyer article, I just think women, like I said, have so many disadvantages. And your story, Sarah, is unbelievable because I just see men bonding. And I don't see women bonding as much. And all my bosses that have been amazing were men, especially Paul Clement, who I hold, my entire career he's responsible for my entire career and being a lawyer and not quitting. I just think women just have a much harder time. And in the Supreme Court bar in particular, it's a job that requires a lot of salesmanship and bullying and sharp elbows and bravado. And I don't think women are as wired for that. We're much more self-aware, and we're not willing to oversell ourselves like men are.
I left out 2 female bosses that I've had because I had specific stories for each of them. So I obviously worked for Carly Fiorina, and she would tell me that men walk into the room with credibility. Women have to earn the credibility. So it's not that you can't get there. You can. You just are going to work a little bit harder to prove yourself, in every situation where men will get that handed to them a little more easily.
Like,
Lisa,
I'm just...
David, so little do people know, although you probably can guess, like David and I talk all the time off this podcast as well. And I call David for life advice all the time. David, you know this. You know that I say this to you all the time.
100%. I just had to interject. Like, I feel I'm like the only guy in the room right now.
When you say walk into a room, I mean, I've walked into a room for the last 15 years with a giant Hello Kitty phone. And that was always, people are like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, because this is my FU to every man in the room. So it's not like I'm trying to walk in the room and get respect. I want to walk in the room and just...
It is a power move.
In a true power move, one of our clients actually purchased for Lisa like an enormous Hello Kitty like background for the giant iPhones back in the day. Like, she's gone through several iterations and they're great.
And I have a Hello Kitty beanbag in my office. I mean, I just get so tired of the whatever that lean in crap. It's just too much.
You don't power pose in the bathroom. Okay. Sarah and I are power posing right now. So Sarah, my other boss, who was Rachel Brand at the Office of Legal Policy, who is an incredible human.
She's amazing.
And talk about... So I hope Rachel won't mind that I'm telling tales out of school here, but I wanted so badly for her to like me. And I was the only female intern.
I totally
that summer.
Get that.
Right. And so I'm trying too hard. Like,
look, everyone wants to be Rachel. So it's like no surprise.
That's right. She was prom queen,
She's got that posture.
Yes. Oh, she does. So I go to her as like the only female, thinking I'm going to like bond with her over being female, like in the most ham-handed way. Like I say something really dumb about like sexism, right? You know, like
with the icebreaker, it's like sexism discussed,
right? And she, one of Rachel's things that she does that I find so fascinating, because I just don't know anyone else who does it her way. Most people, when you say something they disagree with, will be like, yeah, but also, you know, like there's this way to like sort of move the conversation. Rachel will be like, no, I think that's incorrect. And it can feel really awkward. And so in that situation, she was like, I absolutely disagree. And she gave me this then nugget of brilliance that I've kept with me now for 15 years. And she said, Sarah, if you look for sexism around every corner, you'll find it. And it was just so, at the moment, crushing. I was like, and I'm never speaking to her again. I will hide for the rest of the summer. She hates me. And now, of course, we're very good friends as well. And she's my neighbor. But Sarah, I wonder where you find that line between, you know, going to Lisa and being like, this is because I'm a woman versus like, doesn't matter. You got to win the game.
She's a right-wing nut. She's never going to say something like that.
I know.
I guess for me, it's like Lisa wants to win as badly as I want to win. And it was great to find someone who really wants to win as badly as I do and just like really wants to beat the crap out of the other side in a like ethical manner. But like really just that is like what drives her. And also that I like that Lisa is not someone who like pretends to be extremely secure in all moments and like pretends that like she has 1,000% like everything is always perfect and together. Like that is not how Lisa is. And I found it refreshing and very reassuring to be around someone like that, because I also like, I'm not, you know, like 1,000% secure about everything. I'm like fairly neurotic. So Lisa was just a good personality match on that front. Maybe it's because we're both women, but I think it's just like we have some sort of personality trait that despite our many differences on politics and other things is a real commonality.
I'll tell you two very funny stories with major corporations. One, when I was starting out, and I said, I think you really need a woman appellate lawyer. It'll really help bring, you know, some softness to the brand and it would be great. And the client said, that's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. And then another story, he still hired me, but another one was another after a Supreme Court case for a major, you know, corporation, which a lot of women in private practice don't get to argue for, you know, these major corporations said, thank you. This is one of the few cases in the last 5 years it's been argued by a woman, and it really means a lot that the company did that. And the guy said, I don't even know what you're talking about. It never occurred to me. And I was like, okay, Lisa, you just need to keep your mouth shut.
I don't know. I think that Rachel Brand and Katie Biber are two women who I'm just incredibly close with, who I've also worked for. And there is something about authenticity and a feeling that you can be just wholly authentic and a killer and kind of weird and quirky and have, you know, Rachel's posture, or, I mean, Katie Biber's like 3 feet tall. For those who have ever interacted with Katie Biber, well, she's not. But like this, there is something about having another woman, I think, show that as a success.
Yeah, I'll just say, because David, I don't think you're a cookie cutter man, and I just want to make you feel good about yourself. But men have a much easier script in how to dress, act, look, that kind of stuff. I do think, you know, it's gotten a little bit better for men being more of an individual and doing sort of leaning in into, you know, who they are. But
at least we've moved past socks being the way that they show their personalities. That was a horrible era. See, look, I have socks that have a color on them. Ugh. It's
totally cool to have like a beard now. I mean, it's just amazing. Like, men have come so far. It's wonderful. But I do think still, I do feel badly that I do think there is a script for a woman to succeed, and it's not somebody who dresses like me or acts like me. It's more, you're better off just trying to conform to the middle, and it's just the safest path to success. I hate to say it, but it is true.
Sarah, there's something else that I think makes both of you stand out a little bit, which is back in the day, I mean, you know, I sort of have this eras of feminism. You know, there's like feminism 1.0. I think we're like in a 3.0 situation now. But like to be as successful as either of you are, let's say 40 years ago, I don't think either of you would have probably had children. Maybe you wouldn't have even been married. This idea that you can sort of be a full person and a woman in a career hard charging is a relatively new phenomenon. You and Lisa both have husbands and children, and I know Lisa has a dog, and I think you got one since the last time I've been at your house.
Oh yeah, Tyson's very handsome.
I've never heard a dog described as handsome.
Oh, Tyson's handsome.
I mean, he's like the Wikipedia query. He's super handsome. He could be a dog model. It's just like I don't have spare time, and Jeff doesn't either, to like get him off the ground.
Sarah, let me just stop you on what Justice Kagan once said, and she was correct. You don't see all the times where she failed, and you don't see all the times where I've been humiliated and failed and turned down, and all the horrible, embarrassing things that have happened to me. So it's like saying, oh, that marriage looks perfect. It's like, don't kid yourself that unless you're Paul Clement, most people fail a lot and aren't successful. And so in your definition of success, my feeling is if you don't feel successful, you better change your definition of success, because you're going to die a very lonely and unhappy person. My definition of success was being a mom. That's all I cared about. And that's all, like, there's no amount of money you could pay me ever to there's just no amount of money that would have paid me to separate from my kids or not be part-time for almost still part-time. So the most important thing to me ever has been my kids, and then my dog, and then my husband.
So, I hope that's a previously known hierarchy. Otherwise, this could be...
we have to have like a rebuttal podcast with David on it.
But I just think, and so it is a myth to think you can have it all. That's the other thing I don't like. I just think it's crazy. I don't even understand that. You can't have it all. There's always trade-offs. It's true for men too. It's always true that every time, choices have consequences. But as Jeff Wall told me when I was turned down for one of these jobs that I always wanted, with every, door that closes, a window opens. And it was one of the best pieces of advice.
Wait, seriously, Jeff Wall said that to you?
Yeah, so my lifelong dream, it was to get a job in the Obama administration, and I was rejected from like 10 jobs. And I called up Jeff Wall. We were sort of, like work spouses. And he gave me the sort of a turning point life advice he said, Lisa, when you're very old and about to die, will you think, oh my God, if I'd only had that job of civil appellate, if I'd only had one more argument, if I'd only had one more, what are you going to be thinking? And you're going to be thinking about the relationships you've had along the way. And so I tell that story all the time, and it almost gets me emotional. And I remember telling the story to Judge Harris, Pam Harris on the Fourth Circuit, and it's like telling her clerks. And she said, well, that's not what I'm going to be thinking about at all. I'm going to be thinking about what good I did for the world. And I literally just went, oh, dear Lord, I can't. So everyone has, but sometimes it's a good check on yourself. Really, what does life mean to you? And to me, it's all about the relationships that were made along the way and the people. And
that makes Jeff Wall sound like really sincere and emotionally available in a way that I do not consider him.
This was a long time ago.
I'm loving this.
I was pretty upset.
I'm loving this turn in the conversation, because it's just turned into a kind of indictment on workism, sort of this your identity is your work, is your job.
Well, I think you need to work to make money if you need money.
Well, yeah.
Or you're like, if you were born rich, you need work to, I don't know, you go do charities or something, or whatever those rich people do. But I mean, I think work generally sucks.
One of my favorite Lisa moments is like early on when we worked together, she told me like the famous, maybe it's not famous to you guys, but the Peter Kreisler man on a couch story, which is like, Lisa, you can tell it, but it's sort of, Peter Kreisler obviously has had like some very, very cool government jobs, very, very senior person in the Bush administration, civil division, but had like a very good perspective that he imparted and Lisa has popularized on government jobs.
The man on the couch is the best.
You might have this job for a couple of years and everyone knows your name because you are super duper fancy. And then, you're waiting in a pitch 10 years later and you're just a man on a couch. no one knows who you are anymore. Like, you have to keep it in perspective. Like, it is important.
And whenever I tell this story, some law students go, "Who's Peter Keisler?" I'm like, exactly. He's just a man on a couch. But all of us, anyone, we're just going to be like, there is a sense of, this I think helps to grow up in Texas. Like,
I'll never forget the moment my middle school age son said, "Who's Bono?" And I was like, yep, it's all fleeting. Like, it's all fleeting. Yeah.
It's deadly. That hurts. But I think you want to be good at your job. You want to do well. And that's the whole thing for me, because my main goal was to be a mom and to be able to, shop at Neiman's and so forth, is to make sure I was doing something I was good at so I could have some flexibility with work and things like that. And I think if you're always sort of striving and super ambitious, it can be very difficult to get what you want in the other aspects of your life. And then all of a sudden, you just put too many eggs in the work basket, and you're just not a good place to be.
Okay. But I'm going to push back on this because I think that is excellent advice when you turn 40.
Agreed.
It's a little hard, though, I think, for a 25-year-old to hear that and be like, okay, but you were a super striver for a long time. And now you get to say that because your kids are graduating law school and you're Lisa Blatt. But what about those of us who are still out there, even trying to get on the ladder to climb the rungs of the ladder?
You should work hard in your 20s, I do think. But that's also, at least for women, a time in early 30s where you're running out of time to have children if you want to have children.
Yeah, I think it's just, you can't have it all, but you also, there are different seasons to what you're doing. And I think once you reach a certain point, if you gauge your life of I'm a fancy person, which fancy job is my next fancy job? It's a recipe. I think you start to see in your 40s, and onwards, it really is a recipe for unhappiness. So it is nice to, I'm glad that Lisa, sort of fronts that she does not want to be confirmed for anything ever, that she has no such plans. That's not her deal. Because I think it would be exhausting to work with someone like that.
Yeah, for men too, it's the same thing. That you only have that short window of time to be a dad, and then and also to not have your wife cheat on you. So it's just. Okay. Sorry, that took a little.
What is that window, Lisa? When does the cheating window start or stop?
You gotta. At some point, she gives up, but really, there's a time where she's looking around and still shopping.
I just think you really, this shouldn't be news to anyone in their 20s. I mean, I do have kids. I have a son who's 24 and a daughter who's 21. They're going to have, they want it all, but there's just that balance of given the amount of pressure and stress to do well, whether it's for you or because of your parents, because of your peers, or just because you need a job like I did. I just needed a way to get out of poverty. And so all that mattered to me is I had a paycheck. And then I came to Washington and I realized all that mattered to people was what job they had and what administration they worked for. Very foreign concept to me. In Texas, it was, could you join a country club?
It was what summer camp did your kids go to, country club, et cetera?
Yeah. And it's just, I literally just cared about making sure I could pay the rent. So yeah. And I just think sometimes people in Washington, they've had such different lives that they have time to sit around and bicker over everything, including,
But I do feel like and I try to explain this to people in my more honest conversations that I have about, there's a time for grabbing brass rings and for resume grubbing, I call it. You'll see plenty of resume grubbing on the very people who are telling you not to resume grub. They did. That's how they got to the position where they're lecturing you about anything.
I think that's fair, that you need to work hard. I would not do what I do, which is watch a lot of TV.
Oh, I totally disagree. I'm a professional streamer, and it's very enriching to my life.
He does.
Okay. I know, but no, that's all I do now. I'm saying in my 20s, don't watch TV. Work hard and make sure you have a healthy mental health. But realize at some point, if all you care about is collecting the next job, you're going to plateau inevitably, and you're going to be miserable.
This is the Arthur Brooks From Strength to Strength book. I think it's so, so good because it is. It's like, look, you've done this. You did it for your 20s and your 30s. Good for you. But all of that's going to have diminishing returns. And I pick on John Kerry, who I've never met and I do not know. But he seemed like someone who based his whole life around trying to become president of the United States. And he didn't get it. And I just wonder if he thinks he's a failure in some regard when
Yeah, it worked for Joe Biden. It worked for Justice Kagan. I do feel like Elena Kagan spent her whole life for this job and she got it, but she's one person. And I feel like that with parents.
Right.
That,
and there's hundreds who didn't and somehow are unhappy.
And there's hundreds and thousands of millions of parents who do everything they can. And most of the time it will fail to try to turn their children into something they want. And every once in a while, you'll create this perfect
You get Tiger
robot.
Woods. Yeah. Sarah, are there days where you get home and you feel like you failed at both work and parenting and wifing?
Oh yeah, that's called every day. Well, I mean, it's a question of like how you fail and how you deal with failure, and how you try to adjust. So there's never a perfect day. I have 3 kids. They're 5, 3, and 1. I have a husband who also has a very active job. He also does like Supreme Court appellate and also trial stuff at a small firm. And we have a dog. We have lots going on.
Well, and then let's be clear, Sarah literally hangs up on me all the time. And she just...
I mean, sometimes it's like, sorry, but I got peed on. Like, I gotta go.
We're talking substance and the phone just hangs up. And I'm like, she's just lucky because it doesn't even faze me. She literally just hangs up on me. And okay.
I'll be like, Lisa, I gotta go. Like, Allie, our 3-year-old, is like, it's like, she's here, like, gotta go. So Lisa is a very understanding one. And like, she knows it's not because I hate her.
What are you going to do? Someone's,
It's like needs my attention desperately. I'm making dinner. It's on fire. There is no perfect day. The days are, I think like, it's nice that I can be, that Lisa knows that this is like how my life is. And that the joy of being a parent is also figuring out how to rearrange your life around your kids in a way that lets you do things on a different schedule. And it's not always great, but it's also like fun, actually.
Yeah, I will say that this just does play into, because I've been teaching now with Paul Clement, I think for 5 or 6 years, and we teach year round. We teach both at law school and college. And Paul, I've learned so much from Paul. Paul is very doctrinal. I mean, he's brilliant, thinks cases all have rhyme and reason. And I think it's all about, facts and reality and the equities. But we do have these wonderful different approaches to the law. And I think part of it is just our personality, is that Paul is a true intellectual and I'm more someone who likes pop culture and keeping it real. And so I just look at cases a little bit differently. I try to brief the law, but I always think whatever judges or justices are real people with real emotions. And, we just have different approaches to the way we advocate. We have a lot of fun, but we just have very different approaches, and it's wonderful. Like I love when Paul and I talk about cases and how we do oral argument. Very different, but fun.
Can I ask? I know we're running out of time, but there's a contingent of our audience that has been underserved, and that is the baked contingent who just heard that there's a CBD case at the Supreme. And so tell us about the CBD case, because, dude, what's going on?
Sarah, you can take it. We have, I think, 4 really fun petitions. But the CBD is one that speaks to me as a consumer of CBD.
So I think the first and most important fact is this is not necessarily for the big audience, due to the fact that CBD is 0% THC. Usually it is lawful under federal law. And it's a case that is dear to my heart as like the doctrinal half of this duo, because I love RICO cases and cases about like, how can you be injured under this statute that has been harnessed into something that everyone seems to be able to sue under. And it's essentially a product defect claim that has been fashioned into a RICO case. Like, the claim is the person took a supplement that was CBD. It turned out that it was not allegedly THC free, failed a drug test, lost the job. And so the question is, can you have that be an injury under RICO, despite the fact that RICO bars personal injuries as cognizable? So I think it's a fun case on doctrine.
But wait, David, there's more fun cases. We have to run through a couple more of these cert petitions because they are really fun. The bribery, whether if you bribe someone after the fact, is that a quid pro quo bribe?
You give them money after the fact, not bribe them.
Whatever, Lisa, we know you're the advocate. But if you bribe them after the fact.
That's the question presented.
If it's a gratuity, not a bribe at that point. Yes.
It's a great case.
So it's a gratuity. And again, think about how it works for campaign finance. It's like if you can construe literally everything as an after the fact payment, which is true of campaign finance, true of campaign donations, all sorts of other stuff, including the facts of this case involving the mayor of an Indiana town. What's left? What, like, if the government is not held to quid pro quo bribery, like the floodgates kind of open, and that's what the Fifth Circuit has said.
The court loves this. They love this section 18 USC 666. They love public corruption type cases.
I mean, who does not 666? Like, it sounds like there might be something wrong with this.
Public corruption and is great.
You'll have Jack Daniels as a client, but now you also have Starbucks as a client. You have this really interesting NLRB case, but is it the first time that pumpkin spice lattes have made an appearance in a cert petition, Sarah?
Just Sarah and I. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yes. And they're really on my mind because it's fall and we are huge fans of Starbucks in basically all aspects. But the case is also just a fascinating administrative law issue about when can the NLRB get injunctions? Like, does it have to play by the rules that everyone else gets for injunctions, or do they get a special rule?
And this is why Sarah's into the SEC case. But the question I have is, given that I assume your offices are filled with Jack Daniels now and Starbucks, can we assume that y'all occasionally, CBD, after hours, combine all of this?
Yeah, Sarah and I met at Starbucks, and I remember the first summer I went away working for Sarah because I took her to coffee every day. I actually gave her a very large Starbucks gift card, so to make sure she could pay for her Starbucks habit.
The Starbucks gift card was like, if you can't have Lisa in person, it's a bribe.
It's a bribe.
It was a bribe. Also a gratuity.
We're huge Starbucks. My dog loves the puppuccinos there, and yeah.
It's a good thing there's a Starbucks right across the street.
We do have a bunch of, I do love fun cases. I do love energy cases with energy. Sarah likes the doctrine. I like the fun facts.
And this will be the duo that we're watching this term, all the terms coming, many terms yet to be. Thank you guys so much for joining us and all of the billable increments that you have spent with us this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you for not trashing my arguments.
Thank you for not trashing
my arguments. We love your arguments. No, seriously. If you had heard our conversations about your arguments, I think you would be quite pleased.
You know what's funny, though? Because David and I talk about this offline sometimes, because sometimes someone will give a bad argument. Maybe it's their first time arguing. Maybe it's not their first time.
No, I've heard a lot of bad arguments.
And David and I will talk about whether to mention that on the podcast. And I think we have a few rules here, right? Like, generally speaking, you don't trash other people. Like, you don't know them. You don't know what their day was, what happened that morning or that night, or, maybe it just didn't go their way. Maybe they had an off day. Maybe they didn't. Maybe that's just them, in which case, why do you need to trash them? They know it was bad.
No, and we make mistakes too. People make mistakes.
Yeah. And same thing with law students. Try very hard not to some law student publishes something that's not good or crazy. It's like, you don't need to go after a law student by name. You can take on their arguments.
It's social media, though. It's very easy to go on Twitter and just say things. But I do think podcasts have an enormous influence on law students. I don't know any that don't listen to this one. The podcaster.
Oliver Summers, you're the favorite podcast?
No, they have an enormous influence. Just so you know, I offered to, when I heard how much money Neil Katyal was making, I offered Paul to do a podcast with Paul, and he resoundingly rejected me. And so Paul and I will not be doing a podcast. I offered to split 80-20 with him, and he said no.
Wow.
I hope you guys are making as much.
Yeah. Whatever. No.
Paul won't do it.
Well, after now Cannon is bragging about being next to Taylor Swift and Aaron Rodgers because he represents the NFL, and you guys are just getting some pumpkin spice lattes. I feel like the Lisa Sarah duo, like, maybe y'all need a podcast.
Yeah, Paul wants.
I think we would break the internet. And by we, I mean Lisa.
Yeah.
Well, if Dahlia Lithwick hates it, then
I don't know what to say. You guys are the best. Thank you. We really enjoyed it. David, thank you for putting up with us, our little 3 against 1.
I loved every minute of it.
We're 2 against 2. It's Tennessee versus Texas. I'm by that.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. All right. Well, hopefully we can buy y'all some pumpkin spice lattes in the future.